I was 3 months pregnant when my husband looked me in the eyes and said 6 words that destroyed my entire world. That baby isn't mine. Get out. I still remember the way his voice sounded. Cold. Certain. Like he had already decided I was guilty. Like the 3 years we'd spent building a life together meant absolutely nothing. If someone had told me that morning that by midnight I'd be sleeping in my car with nowhere to go, I would have laughed. I would have called them crazy. Because that morning I was happy. Not perfect happy. But the kind of happy that comes from believing your future is finally falling into place. My name is Emma. I'm 29 years old. And until that day I thought I had the perfect marriage. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. The positive pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter. I couldn't stop staring at it. 2 pink lines. 2 tiny lines that changed everything. I actually cried. Not sad tears. Happy tears. The kind that come when something you've secretly wanted for years finally happens. I picked up the test with trembling hands. A baby. Michael and I were going to have a baby. I imagined his reaction. The smile. The excitement. The way he'd probably pull me into a hug. For months we'd been talking about starting a family. Looking at houses with extra bedrooms. Making plans. Dreaming. I couldn't wait to tell him. I wrapped the pregnancy test in a tiny gift box I'd bought weeks earlier. Just in case. Maybe that should have been my first warning. Maybe some part of me already knew things weren't as perfect as they seemed. But I ignored it. Because love has a way of making you ignore the signs. That evening Michael came home later than usual. Again. Lately that had become normal. Long hours. Business meetings. Last-minute projects. There was always an excuse. I never questioned it. I trusted him. Completely. Michael. He dropped his keys on the counter. Yeah. I have a surprise. For the first time all day I saw him smile. Really. I handed him the gift box. My heart was pounding. This was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of our lives. He opened it. Looked inside. And everything changed. His smile disappeared instantly. The color drained from his face. His jaw tightened. First I thought he was shocked. Then I realized something was very wrong. Very wrong. He slowly lifted the pregnancy test from the box. Staring at it. Silent. Motionless. Like a statue. Michael. Nothing. Are you okay? His eyes finally met mine. And I felt a chill run through my entire body. Because I'd never seen him look at me like that before. Not once. There was no love in his eyes. No excitement. Only anger. Pure anger. How far along are you? The question caught me off guard. What? How far along? About 3 months. The room went silent. His expression darkened. Then he laughed. A short bitter laugh. The kind that makes your stomach drop. Wow. What? Wow. My heart started racing. Michael, what's wrong? Then he said it. The sentence that shattered everything. That baby isn't mine. For a second I couldn't breathe. I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. What? Don't pretend. His voice rose. Michael, what are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. I stared at him. Completely confused. Terrified. Michael. 3 months ago. His eyes burned into mine. I was out of town for 6 weeks. The blood drained from my face. Suddenly I understood. Or at least I understood what he thought. 3 months earlier Michael had been away for work. A long business project in another state. But what he didn't know was that my doctor had already explained the timeline. Pregnancy dating isn't exact. The estimated dates overlap. The baby could absolutely be his. But Michael wasn't listening. He'd already reached his conclusion. And nothing I said mattered. For the next hour I tried explaining. Begging. Reasoning. Crying. Nothing worked. Every word only seemed to make him angrier. Eventually he stood up. Walked upstairs. And returned carrying a suitcase. My suitcase. I stared at it. Confused. Terrified. No. His face remained emotionless. Pack your things. No. Pack. Michael, please listen. Get out. I jumped. I'd never heard him scream before. Not once. My husband. The man who promised to protect me. The man who promised to love me forever. was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was garbage, like I meant nothing. And somehow, that hurt even more than the accusation itself. An hour later I was sitting in my car, pregnant, crying, watching the lights of my own house through the windshield. The house we'd bought together. The house I'd decorated. The house where I thought we'd raise our children. I wasn't allowed inside. Michael had changed the locks. Just like that. One argument. One accusation. And suddenly I was homeless. I called him. No answer. Texted him. Blocked. I sat there for hours. Waiting. Hoping. Praying he'd come outside and tell me it was all a mistake. He never did. Around midnight the porch lights turned off. The house went dark. And that's when reality finally hit me. I was alone. Completely alone. And I had no idea that things were about to get much worse. Because while I sat in that car believing my marriage was falling apart, someone else was quietly making sure it stayed that way. Someone who wanted Michael to hate me. Someone who had been manipulating us both for months. And I hadn't even realized they existed. Not yet. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes I heard Michael's voice. That baby isn't mine. Over and over. Again and again. Like a broken record playing inside my head. The worst part wasn't even the accusation. It was how easily he'd believed it. How quickly he'd decided I was capable of betraying him. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of memories. 3 years of promises. And none of it had mattered. One pregnancy test. One misunderstanding. And suddenly I was the villain in his story. I spent the night curled up in the driver's seat of my car, parked behind a 24-hour grocery store. The temperature dropped after midnight. I used an old sweater as a blanket. By morning my back was aching. My eyes were swollen. And reality was impossible to ignore. I was pregnant, homeless, and completely alone. At least that's what I thought. The first person I called was my best friend, Rachel. She answered immediately. Emma. The second I heard her voice I started crying. Not graceful crying. Not movie crying. Ugly crying. The kind where you can't even get words out. Emma, what's wrong? I told her everything. Every horrible detail. The pregnancy test. The accusation. The suitcase. The locks. The car. By the time I finished, Rachel was furious. Are you serious? I nodded even though she couldn't see me. He actually threw you out. Yes. Without even listening. Yes. There was silence. Then she said something that stuck with me. Emma, this doesn't make sense. What doesn't? Michael. I frowned. What do you mean? I've known him for years. So this doesn't sound like him. I wanted to agree. But after last night I wasn't sure I knew who Michael was anymore. Rachel insisted I stay with her. By noon, I was settled into her guest room. Nothing fancy. Just a bed. A dresser. A small window. But after sleeping in my car it felt like a luxury hotel. For the first time in 24 hours I felt safe. Unfortunately the feeling didn't last. Because around 3 o'clock that afternoon my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. The voice on the other end made my stomach tighten. Emma. It was Michael's mother. Patricia. And she sounded angry. Very angry. Now, Patricia and I had never been especially close. She was polite. Friendly enough. But she always made me feel like I was being evaluated. Judged. Measured. Like I was applying for a position I hadn't quite earned. Still, she'd never openly disliked me. At least not until now. Patricia. How could you? I blinked. What? How could you do this to my son? The words hit like a slap. Immediately I realized what had happened. Michael had told her. But he'd only told his version. Not mine. Patricia, please listen. No. Her voice sharpened. I trusted you. I felt tears building again. Nothing happened. Michael says otherwise. Michael is wrong. Then explain the pregnancy. I can. Can you? The doubt in her voice hurt more than I expected. Because it wasn't just Michael anymore. Now his family believed it too. My reputation. My marriage. My future. Everything was unraveling. And I couldn't stop it. After hanging up, I sat on Rachel's bed staring at the wall. Completely numb. That should have been the worst part of my day. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because that evening, Rachel showed me something that changed everything. Something I still can't believe I missed. Emma. Rachel walked into the room holding her phone. Look at this. I glanced at the screen. Facebook. Michael's profile. What about it? Read the comments. Confused, I leaned closer. The post was recent. Only a few hours old. A photo of Michael sitting at a restaurant. The caption read, "Sometimes the people you trust most betray you." My chest tightened. There were hundreds of comments. Most were supportive. But one stood out immediately. A woman named Vanessa. Her comment simply said, "You deserve better. I've been telling you that for months." Months. I frowned. Who is Vanessa? Rachel's expression darkened. I was hoping you could tell me. I've never heard of her. Rachel zoomed in on the profile. Blonde. Beautiful. Perfect makeup. Perfect smile. Perfect everything. And for some reason my stomach dropped. Because something about her felt familiar. Not familiar enough to recognize. Just familiar enough to bother me. That night I couldn't stop thinking about Vanessa. Who was she? How did she know Michael? And why had she been warning him about me for months? The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. Because there was only one explanation. Michael had been talking to her. A lot. Enough for her to feel confident commenting publicly. Enough for her to believe she knew our marriage. Enough to think she had a right to interfere. And somehow, that felt worse than the accusation itself. The next morning everything exploded. Again. I was eating breakfast when my phone rang. This time it was Michael. For one ridiculous second hope surged through me. Maybe he'd calm down. Maybe he'd talk to someone. Maybe he wanted to apologize. I answered immediately. Michael. His voice was ice cold. We need to talk. My heart jumped. Okay. Meet me at the house. Hope grew. Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. Maybe he'd realized his mistake. Maybe. Bring your key. What? So you can return it. My heart sank. Instantly. Painfully. He wasn't calling to reconcile. He was calling to erase me. 30 minutes later, I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly the same, but somehow it didn't feel like home anymore. Michael was waiting outside. Arms crossed. Expression unreadable. As I climbed out of the car, I noticed someone standing beside him. A woman. Blonde. Beautiful. Perfect makeup. Perfect smile. Vanessa. My stomach twisted. Hard. For a second nobody spoke. Then Vanessa stepped forward. Like she belonged there. Like she had every right. Emma. I stared at her. Speechless. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile someone gives when they think they've already won. And suddenly I knew. I didn't have proof. I didn't have evidence. But I knew. This woman wanted my life. And she wasn't even trying to hide it. Michael handed me a small envelope. What's this? Your remaining things. I looked inside. Few documents. A spare credit card. Some jewelry. That's it. 3 years together reduced to an envelope. I wanted to scream. Instead I looked at him. Really looked at him. Searching for the man I married. Searching for the man who used to love me. I couldn't find him. It was like he was gone. Replaced by someone else. Someone angry. Someone bitter. Someone being controlled by fear. Or maybe by someone standing right beside him. Then Vanessa did something strange. Something tiny. Something most people wouldn't notice. But I did. As she adjusted her purse, a folded paper slipped out. Only for a second. Then she shoved it back inside. But I'd already seen it. A medical document. And at the top was a logo. The logo of Michael's doctor's office. My pulse quickened. Why would Vanessa have paperwork from Michael's doctor? Why? The question echoed in my head all day. And that night. And the next day. Because the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Unless Vanessa's connection to Michael went far deeper than friendship. Far deeper than advice. Far deeper than concern. And if I was right, then someone had been lying. A lot. The problem was I still didn't know who. Michael. Vanessa. Or both. But I was about to find out. Because 3 days later, A lawyer would call me with information that would turn this entire nightmare upside down. Information that would make the DNA test look small by comparison. And when the truth finally came out, someone's life was going to be destroyed. 3 days passed. 3 long painful days. Days filled with unanswered questions. Days filled with tears. Days filled with silence. The worst part wasn't losing my home. It wasn't sleeping in a guest room. It wasn't even knowing my husband believed I had betrayed him. The worst part was the uncertainty. Not knowing why. Not knowing what had happened. Not knowing how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Every morning I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare. Every morning reality hit me all over again. And every day Michael moved further away. On the 3rd afternoon, I was sitting in Rachel's kitchen staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold. My phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it. Lately I wasn't in the mood for scam calls. But something told me to answer. So I did. Hello. A man's voice replied. Emma Carter. Yes. My name is Daniel Brooks. I frowned. I don't think we know each other. We don't. There was a pause. I'm an attorney. Immediately my stomach tightened. Attorney. Why would a lawyer be calling me? Had Michael already filed for divorce? The thought made me feel sick. I think you have the wrong person. I don't. His tone remained calm. Professional. Measured. I need to speak with you regarding your husband. Every muscle in my body tensed. What about him? I'm afraid that's not something I can discuss over the phone. My pulse quickened. What is this about? Another pause. Then, it's important. For the next hour I couldn't think straight. Every possible scenario ran through my head. Had Michael gotten into legal trouble? Was he hurt? Was this related to our marriage? The baby? Vanessa? The possibilities felt endless. And none of them were good. By the time I arrived at the lawyer's office, my hands were shaking. Daniel Brooks looked exactly how you'd imagine an attorney would look. Mid-50s. Gray hair. Sharp suit. Serious expression. He greeted me politely and motioned toward a chair. Thank you for coming. I sat down. What is this about? He folded his hands. For a moment he seemed unsure how to begin. That scared me. A lot. Because when lawyers struggle to find words, it's usually not a good sign. Finally he spoke. Mrs. Carter. I swallowed hard. Yes. What I'm about to tell you may be upsetting. Those words immediately triggered panic. What happened? He took a breath. Then slid a folder across the desk. Do you recognize this name? I looked down. The folder contained a single document. One name was highlighted. Vanessa Reed. My heart skipped. Immediately. What about her? The attorney studied my reaction carefully. So you know who she is. I recently met her. His eyebrows rose slightly. Recently. 3 days ago. Now he looked surprised. Genuinely surprised. And suddenly I knew. Whatever he was about to tell me, it was connected to Vanessa. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were several pages. Photographs. Documents. Records. I stared at them in confusion. What is this? Information. About Vanessa. Yes. A cold sensation spread through my chest. Slowly. Like ice water. Because something about this felt wrong. Very wrong. Mrs. Carter. Daniel leaned forward. How much do you know about your husband's past? I blinked. What do you mean? Before he met you. I frowned. Not much. Michael rarely talked about his life before us. He'd had relationships, jobs, friends. Nothing unusual. At least that's what I thought. Daniel nodded. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Vanessa Reed was engaged to your husband. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. What? They were engaged? No. Yes. No. The word escaped automatically, because it didn't make sense. Michael never mentioned an engagement. Not once. Not ever. I stared at the lawyer, waiting for him to tell me this was some kind of misunderstanding. He didn't. They were together for 4 years. My heart pounded harder. 4 years. Yes. And engaged. Yes. I couldn't breathe. How could Michael never mention that? How could someone hide something that important? An entire engagement. An entire chapter of his life. Gone. Erased. Like it never happened. Why are you telling me this? Daniel hesitated. Then he opened another document. Because Vanessa contacted my office. I froze. What? Several months ago. The room fell silent. My brain struggled to process what he was saying. Several months ago. Not days. Not weeks. Months. Before the pregnancy. Before the accusation. Before everything. Why? Daniel looked uncomfortable. Because he knew exactly how bad this sounded. She requested information regarding your husband's family estate. My confusion deepened. Estate. Your husband's grandfather. I stared at him. Blankly. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. Then I remembered. Michael's grandfather had been wealthy. Extremely wealthy. Most of the family rarely discussed it. But there had always been rumors about inheritance. Properties. Investments. Trust funds. I'd never cared. Money wasn't important to me. Apparently it was important to someone. Daniel slid another document forward. This is where things become concerning. My pulse quickened. I looked down. And immediately felt sick. Because Vanessa's name appeared over and over. Dozens of times. Phone records. Emails. Meeting requests. Notes. For months. 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 Then Daniel pointed to a specific page. Read this. I looked. And froze. The document contained handwritten notes. One sentence was highlighted. If Michael divorces his wife before inheritance distribution, legal complications decrease significantly. I stopped breathing. Literally. For several seconds. I just stared. Unable to move. Unable to think. Unable to process. Finally I looked up. What is this? Daniel's expression turned grim. That is exactly what I've been trying to figure out. The room spun. Because suddenly pieces started connecting. Small pieces. Terrifying pieces. Vanessa appearing in Michael's life. Months of communication. Warnings about me. The accusation. The sudden collapse of my marriage. The timing. None of it felt random anymore. Not anymore. You think she planned this? The words came out as a whisper. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead he chose his next words carefully. I think Vanessa had a significant interest in your husband's future. A significant interest. Lawyer language. Careful language. But the meaning was obvious. Money. She wanted money. Maybe more. Maybe Michael himself. Maybe both. Then Daniel said something that shook me even more. Mrs. Carter. I looked up. There is one more thing. My stomach dropped. Because every time someone said those words lately my life got worse. What? The lawyer opened another folder. And this time the photographs inside made my heart stop. Completely. There was Michael. And Vanessa. Together. Not recently. Years ago. Laughing. Smiling. Holding each other. Engaged. Happy. In love. I stared at the images. And suddenly understood something terrifying. Vanessa wasn't just some random woman trying to interfere. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't a coworker. She wasn't an outsider. She was the woman Michael almost married. The woman who had lost him. The woman who never got over it. And maybe, just maybe, the woman who wanted him back. At any cost. That night I couldn't sleep. Again. I sat by the window in Rachel's guest room staring into the darkness. Thinking. Replaying everything. Every conversation. Every moment. Every detail. And then something hit me. Hard. A memory. Small. But important. 3 months earlier. Right before Michael's business trip. He'd started acting differently. Not cold. Not distant. Just distracted. As if someone was constantly messaging him. Constantly demanding his attention. At the time I'd ignored it. Now I wasn't so sure. Because what if Vanessa had never left? What if she'd been there all along? Working behind the scenes. Planting doubts. Whispering lies. Waiting for the perfect moment to destroy us. And if that was true, then my marriage hadn't fallen apart by accident. Someone had pushed it. Deliberately. Carefully. Patiently. The only question was, How far was Vanessa willing to go? I would get my answer sooner than expected, because less than 48 hours later, a DNA test would be ordered. And when the results came back, they wouldn't just prove who the father was. They would expose a secret that had been buried for nearly 30 years. A secret powerful enough to destroy multiple lives, including Vanessa's. 48 hours later, I sat inside a medical office staring at a white wall. The DNA test had been arranged. Not because Michael trusted me, not because he suddenly wanted answers, but because his attorney believed it would help settle the divorce faster. That fact hurt. A lot. After everything we'd been through, he wasn't taking the test to save our marriage. He was taking it to end it. I sat in the waiting room holding my stomach. My baby kicked softly. A tiny movement. A tiny reminder. No matter what happened today, I wasn't alone. I had my child. And somehow that thought gave me strength. Michael arrived 10 minutes later. The second he walked into the room, my heart cracked. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. Unshaven. Tired. For the first time since all this started, he didn't look angry. He looked broken. But neither of us spoke. There was simply too much pain between us. Too much damage. Too much silence. The test itself was quick. Simple swabs. Simple paperwork. Simple procedures. Yet somehow it felt like the most important moment of our lives. Because one result would determine everything. Our marriage. Our future. Our family. Everything. The waiting period was torture. Days dragged by. Every phone call made my heart jump. Every notification made my stomach tighten. And then finally, the call came. The meeting was held at Daniel Brooks' office. The same lawyer who had shown me Vanessa's records. This time everyone was present. Me, Michael, Daniel, and unexpectedly, Vanessa. The moment I saw her, something felt wrong. Very wrong. She looked nervous. Not confident. Not victorious. Nervous. As if she already knew something terrible was about to happen. Daniel opened the folder. The room became silent. Completely silent. My pulse pounded in my ears. Michael stared at the table. Vanessa sat rigidly in her chair. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. The DNA results are complete. I stopped breathing. So, Michael's voice sounded strained. Daniel looked directly at him. The child is yours. Silence. Absolute silence. Michael froze. Completely. Like his brain couldn't process the words. Then Daniel repeated them. The child is 100% yours. My eyes filled with tears instantly. Not because I was surprised. I always knew the truth. But because finally, someone else knew it too. Michael's face went white. The color disappeared completely. He looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in weeks. And I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Horror. Pure horror. Because suddenly he understood. I hadn't lied. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't betrayed him. He had destroyed our marriage based on a false accusation. And there was no taking it back. Emma. His voice cracked. Just one word. My name. But after everything that happened, it felt meaningless. The damage was already done. Then Daniel spoke again. And what he said next changed everything. Again. There is another matter we need to discuss. The room turned toward him. Even Vanessa looked confused. Daniel opened a second folder. One I'd never seen before. And neither had Michael. This information came to light during our investigation. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Daniel slid several documents onto the table. Birth records. Family records. Old legal filings. Decades old. Michael frowned. What is this? Daniel took a breath. Then delivered the bombshell. Vanessa Reed is related to your family. The room exploded. What? Michael stood immediately. Vanessa's face lost all color. I stared in disbelief. Daniel continued. Specifically, she is the biological granddaughter of your grandfather. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. What are you saying? Michael whispered. Daniel answered carefully. Years ago your grandfather had a child outside of his marriage. The room spun. A child whose existence remained hidden. Daniel pointed toward Vanessa. That child was Vanessa's mother. Michael sat back down. Slowly, like his legs had stopped working. Vanessa looked like she might faint. Suddenly everything made sense. The inheritance, the obsession, the investigation, the manipulation. Vanessa hadn't simply wanted Michael. She wanted recognition. She wanted access to the fortune. She wanted what she believed had been stolen from her family. And somewhere along the way, that desire had become dangerous. The lawyer revealed everything. Emails, private messages, attempts to interfere, efforts to convince Michael I was unfaithful, months of manipulation, months of lies, months of calculated deception, all orchestrated by Vanessa. Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. I never meant for it to go this far. But nobody believed her, because it had already gone too far. Far too far. A marriage destroyed. A pregnancy ruined. Lives shattered. Trust broken. Then something happened that I never expected. Michael started crying. Not quietly. Not politely. He broke. Completely. The man who had thrown me out. The man who had accused me. The man who had stopped believing me. Finally understood what he'd done. After the meeting ended, everyone left except us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Michael looked at me. His eyes red. Filled with regret. Filled with shame. Filled with pain. I'm sorry. I said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. I'm so sorry. His voice broke again. I failed you. For the first time I saw genuine remorse. Real remorse. Not guilt over being wrong. Guilt over what he'd done. Emma. He swallowed hard. I don't expect forgiveness. I remained silent. I don't deserve it. More silence. But I need you to know something. I finally looked up. What? He wiped away tears. I never stopped loving you. The words hurt, because part of me still loved him too. But love wasn't the problem. Trust was. And trust had been shattered. Months later, our daughter was born. Beautiful. Healthy. Perfect. The moment Michael held her, he cried again. And honestly, so did I. Because despite everything, she deserved two parents who loved her. Did we immediately fix our marriage? No. Real life doesn't work that way. Trust takes time. Healing takes time. Forgiveness takes time. We spent months in counseling. Months rebuilding. Months learning how to communicate again. And slowly, very slowly, we found our way back. Not because we forgot the past, but because we learned from it. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about betrayal. It wasn't about marriage. And it wasn't about DNA tests. It was this. The truth doesn't always arrive immediately. Sometimes lies move faster. Sometimes accusations sound louder. Sometimes trust feels impossible. But eventually, the truth catches up. And when it does, everything changes. Today, whenever I look at my daughter, I'm reminded of that lesson. Because she exists because the truth survived. Because love survived. Because we survived. And no matter how dark things become, never let someone else's lies define your story. Write your own ending. Because sometimes, the ending you never expected becomes the one that saves you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional, shocking, and unforgettable stories every week. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.